Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me in learning about the Dead Sea Scrolls, specifically tonight, the Damascus Document. I hope that you learn something new and that the Father reveals his truths in this document. Let's take a look. All right. So here we have the Damascus Document, and it was found in Geniza, Cairo, Egypt. And it was also found in the fourth cave at Qumran. That's why we have the 4Q 266 through 272. And as I have stated in the past, my favorite version of the Dead Sea Scrolls translation is called a New Translation by Wise, Abegg, and Cook. This document was originally called the Zadokite Fragments. That alone should tell you something, that they've changed the name over time. 7 copies were found in Qumran, 2 of which were found in the Geniza, Cairo, Egypt area. And then we have 5 of them found in Qumran. The authors of the New Translation state that part of the fragments appear to be commentary and added later, and we'll get into that. You're going to notice a shift of authorship during this time. Today, we are going to be learning about the children of light, the boundary shifters, the teacher, the beloved teacher, and the teacher of righteousness. So we also see a lot of scripture being quoted in and around the Damascus documents. We have everything from Genesis through the prophets, so Ezekiel, Isaiah, Micah, and then all the way to Joel. So we're seeing a lot of scriptures quoted in the documents. We also are going to see new to us laws. So these are laws that seem new, but they're actually the same laws that we have in our scriptures. These are just expounded upon here in the Damascus document, and you're going to notice that as we study the Dead Sea Scrolls as well. We are also going to see something that seems a little bit Talmudic, and it's because it probably is, and we'll get into that. And I just want to show you some color coding that I have done throughout this presentation. If you see a yellow, it's just my highlight that I'm going to talk about that specifically. In the blue are perhaps names that you don't recognize or key people that's referenced here, not only in the Damascus documents, but throughout the Dead Sea Scrolls. And then anything in green is something that refers to a prophecy about the future generations. All right, so we have the document has been translated by a lot of different people, but today specifically I'm going to be reading from the New Translation that I mentioned earlier. So I'm going to give you their introduction as well, because I think it's pretty important. So it says, Cairo, Geniza was published in 1910 under the Zadokite Fragments. The name is derived from the frequent mention of the sons of Zadak in the text. And then we have a gentleman by the name of Schechter who believed that the writing originated in a Jewish sect, as we know of the Zadokites, of about the 1st century BC. Although the 2 manuscripts he published in the Geniza manuscripts were themselves medieval copies dating from the 10th and 12th centuries. So he was giving us the information ahead of time, but then we find more in the caves. So the dating of the Zadokite fragments remain an issue for decades. Many scholars agreed that Schechter, with him, many others dismissed his theory, preferring to date the document centuries later. The discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls, however, settled that, because we were able to determine that it was much older than that. Most scholars had already concluded that the Dead Sea sect was the source of the Damascus document. Moreover, it was all appearances as of one group's most important text containing clues to its history. So here we're seeing that if we didn't find the Damascus documents or any of the scrolls in the Qumran caves, we wouldn't be able to place this, but because we did find it in the caves, we found so much more and we can date it more accurately. All right, and it says, despite its occasional obscurities, however, the book can be easily divided into two broad sections, an exhortation section and the laws section. All right, so we're going to get into that. Let's start. All right, so we have 4Q 266. So this will have page numbers up at the top that go along with the version that I'm reading. So if you want to follow along, great. Otherwise, I did list the documents and where you can find them. Perhaps you have a different version. You should still be able to find them based on the fragment and the information that is provided here for you. All right, so the first thing that we're going to look at, anytime we see these dots, if you haven't studied the Damascus Documents or any of the Dead Sea Scrolls, you might not understand this. But anytime you see these dots, it's when they can't determine what the text is. And again, these are all fragments, so they're doing the best they can. In some instances, they have found another fragment with the same verses or same wording, and they're able to fill in some blanks. So sometimes they're able to do that. Sometimes they actually fill in what they think could have been there. And they tell you when they do that. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started here. The children of light, to avoid the ways of evil, blanks, obviously, until the time appointed for punishment is past, blank. God saw all her deeds and that they brought all blank to the boundary shifters. Okay, so we have our first highlight, the boundary shifters. Now, if you watched my introduction to the Dead Sea Scrolls, you'll note that these are not the good guys, and we'll find out more as we go along. All right, to the boundary shifters, and all of it will be done in the era of wickedness. Listen to me, for now I shall make known to you the awesome blank, his wonderful miracles I shall relate to you, hidden from humanity. So I have this in green highlight only because this is something hidden from humanity. But guess what? We have found the scroll, so it is coming back. So I'm really excited. So this was told or prophesied that this would be hidden, but we know that things are coming out now. All right, so it's hidden from humanity. Heavens, who lives in the deepest, he has sealed blank in the commandments, in the offering, blank, and they did not obey the voice of Moses. They went about spreading lies about his laws from God's covenant. They strayed. Folks, we know that Israel strayed. This is letting us know why we are separated from the Father. It's because we have come out away from the commandments. All right. And so they're just repeating what we already know, is that they have separated themselves. And it says, both small and great, please tell us about your ways, your conversation. And you appeared and understood. They shall restore the blank. I am dust and ashes. Give heed. So right here we're seeing that the first fragment we looked at is done, and so they found a different fragment to complete this part. And it says, later generations, for surely they will come to pass, what it is its beginning and what is its ending, before it comes upon them. For it is not permitted to celebrate their holidays too early or too late. Folks, if you have read the Book of Jubilees, you know that this is in regards to the calendar. We know that there are groups of people who are celebrating their holidays too early or too late. Probably because they're following the wrong calendar. So, yes, we have been told in the Damascus Documents that there are going to be people in the future who are going to be celebrating these holidays too early or too late. And that's because the calendar has been lost for so long. And if you have been a part of my page for a little bit, I've only had a page for a very short time, but I've been trying to get this out to people to let them know that we need to come back to his ways. All right, let's continue. Yes, periods of God's wrath are decreed for a people who know him not. And he has established times of favor for those who seek his commandments. Favor for his commandments, folks. And to those who live blamelessly in the proper way. The proper way, we're going to see that throughout the scrolls. The proper way, or the people of the way. So we're going to see this over and over. He uncovered their eyes to the hidden things and opened their ears that they might hear deep things and understand future events before they happen to them. Folks, I think this is amazing because it is so true. He is opening our eyes and ears to hear the hidden things. And these scrolls are those things that have been hidden. Other books like Baruch and Esdras and Jubilees and Enoch, they're coming back. Okay, he's revealing these things. This is where we are today. All right, we're moving right along to the next column, which is in the Damascus Document. And it says, so listen, all you who recognize righteousness and consider the deeds of God. When he has a dispute with any mortal, he passes judgment on those who spurn him. We know that there is punishment for those who aren't following him and trying to seek out righteousness. Now, folks, I know that some people might get frustrated that I'm using the word God. This is how it's been translated, but I know it's Elohim or Yahuwah. So I might change it up throughout my reading of this. So just bear with me. All right. Now we move on here. A description of Israel's sin resulting in exile and God's mercy on the generation that returned from exile. Okay, let's take a look here. For when Israel abandoned him by being faithless, he turned away from Israel and from his sanctuary and gave them up to the sword. All right. So we know that this is talking about, in this reference, it's actually talking about, going into Babylon here. But when he called to mind the covenant he had made with their forefathers, he left a remnant for Israel and did not allow them to be exterminated. In the era of wrath, 390 years at the time, he handed them over to the power of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, took care of them and caused them to grow from Israel and from Aaron a root of planting, to inherit his land and to grow fat on the good produce of his soil. So if you haven't checked out my Jubilees calendar timeline, 390 years after the children of Israel go into captivity is actually the time where, before, not after. Before was the time that Solomon had died and Jeroboam, who was on Israel's kingdom, and then for Rehoboam, for Judah, they took over. So this was 390 years. So it says in the era of wrath, 390 years at that time, he handed them over. So that's what's going on. We're talking about going over to Babylon at this time. All right. And then we have, they considered their iniquity, and they knew that they were guilty men, and had been like the blind, and like those groping for the way 20 years. But Elohim considered their deeds, that they had sought him with a whole heart. He raised up for them a teacher of righteousness to guide them in the way of his heart. So Here's a new name, teacher of righteousness. Now, what's interesting is a lot of these translators are just translating, but they might not actually have a relationship with our Messiah or our Father, but they're translating it. And a lot of the translators don't understand who the teacher of righteousness is. We know the teacher of righteousness is Yahusha. So he raised them up for a teacher of righteousness to guide them in the way of his heart. He taught to later generations what Elohim did to the generation deserving wrath, a company of traitors. They are the ones who depart from the proper way. That is the time of which it is written, like a rebellious cow, so rebelled Israel. This is in Hosea 4:16. It says, for Israel slides back as a backsliding heifer. Now Yahuwah will feed them as a lamb in a large place. All right, moving right along here. Again, keep in mind the page numbers are up at the top. When the man of mockery, here's another name, another person, a character, and you can probably guess who that might be. There are no names given. We are to assume that this is not a good guy. When the man of mockery appeared, he sprayed on Israel lying waters, and he led them to wander in the trackless wasteland. He brought down the lofty heights of old, turned aside from paths of righteousness, and shifted the boundary marks that the forefathers had set up to mark their inheritance, so that the curses of his covenant took hold of them. Because of this, they were handed over to the sword that avenges the breach of his covenant. All right, so we have the boundary shifters that we talked about previously. These are people who are shifting the boundary marks. So they're changing up laws, they're changing up commandments and all other information here. For they had sought flattery, choosing travesties of true religion. They looked for gaps in the law. They favored the fine neck, and they called the guilty innocent and the innocent guilty. All right, so we know that happens. What is good is going to be called bad. What is bad is going to be called good. Isaiah 5:20 states, woe to those who call evil good and good evil. He who put darkness for light and light for darkness, who put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. All right, so we know this is happening, and they overstepped the covenant, violated the law, and they conspired together to kill the innocent. For all those who lived pure lives, they loathed from the bottom of their heart. So they persecuted them violently and were happy to see the people quarrel. Because of all of this, God became very angry. All right, so we have column 2. It's just telling us that there is a shift in the column. Same fragment, just a different part of the fragment. Okay, so God became very angry with their company. All right, he annihilated the lot of them because all their deeds were uncleanness to him. Now hasten to me, all members of the covenant, so I can make plain to you the ways of the wicked, so you can leave the paths of sin. Elohim, who loves true knowledge, has positioned wisdom and cleverness in front of him. Cunning and true knowledge wait on him. So far, folks, this seems very good, very scriptural. Not saying it is scripture, but it's going along the lines of the history of the Israelites that we know. And a lot of people throw out the Dead Sea Scrolls because they might not agree with something. So far, it's on track for me. All right. He is very patient and forgiving, covering the sin of those who repent of wrongdoing, but strength, might, and great wrath and flames of fire with all the angels of destruction shall come against against and who rebel against the proper way. So we know the enemy is against those who are following the proper way, the commandments, right? All right. And then it says, and who despises the law until they are without remnant or survivor, for Elohim had not chosen them from ancient eternity. Before they were created, he knew what they would do. So he rejected the generations of old and turned away from the land until they were gone. Folks, he chose his people. And he knew what they were going to do, right? He knows all. All right. And then let's see here. I wrote down over here Genesis 48:6, and it says, and the children that you fathered after them shall be yours, and they shall be called by the name of their brothers in their inheritance. He already knows who is going to follow him. He's chosen you, folks. He knows the times of appearance and the number and exact times of everything that has ever existed and ever will exist before it happens in the proper time for all the years of eternity. It's amazing, amazing. And in all of these times, he has arranged that there should be for himself people called by name. Remember this one? He called them by name so that there would always be survivors on earth replenishing the surface of the earth with their descendants. He taught them through those anointed by the Holy Spirit, the seers of truth. Those are the prophets. And he explicitly called them by name, but whoever he had rejected, he caused to stray. Deep. It's very deep. All right. Moving along here, we have a homily on the willful heart. Anytime you see something here in italics, this is the author's, the translations of the translation. This is what their input is here. All right. All right. So now, my children, listen to me that I may uncover your eyes to see and understand the deeds of Elohim, choosing what pleases him and hating what he rejects, living perfectly in all his ways, not turning away through thoughts caused by the sinful urge and lecherous eyes. All right. He wants us to serve him the way he ordains. He wants to have us to come to him on his terms. We want to please him by following his ways. His ways. And that's what we're coming back to. We're a generation who are coming back to his ways. And again, the writers, the authors, the Zadokites are telling us that he is calling us back. They knew that Israel was going to go astray. They knew that generations were going to be lost, but he wants us to come back. All right, let's continue. When they went about their willful heart, the guardian angels of heaven fell and were ensnared by it, for they did not observe the commandments of Elohim. Obviously, these are the watchers, the fallen angels. Their sons, the Nephilim, who were as tall as cedars and whose bodies were as big as mountains, fell by it. I just put in a couple of pictures. This entire Damascus document is not full of any pictures. I personally think that what's called the Devil's Tower is an ancient tree. The Nephilim were as tall as these big trees. They were huge as mountains. Folks, if you haven't looked at mountain shapes that look a lot like human beings, giants, I would definitely research that. I believe that a lot of these big giants that are in the stones are in fact some of the Nephilim. Anyway, back to the document. Everything mortal on dry land expired and became as if they had never existed, because they did their own will. Folks, this is important. There is our own will versus his will, his ways, and did not keep the commandments of their Maker until finally his anger was aroused against them. All right. Whew. That's a lot. That's really, Genesis 6, we know about what the Watchers came and what they did and how they went against the Father and denied him. So this is our ancestors, the Zadokites, are reminding us where this came from, where the sin came from. All right, let's read on about what happened. We all know the story of Noah. By it, the sons of Noah and their families went astray, and by it they were exterminated. Abraham did not live by it and was considered God's friend because he observed the commandments of Elohim, and he did not choose to follow the will of his own spirit. And he passed them on to Isaac and to Jacob, and they too observed them. They too were recorded as friends of Elohim and eternal partners of the covenant. But the sons of Jacob went astray by them and were punished for their errors. In Egypt, their descendants lived by their willful heart. Again, here we are. We've got his ways, our own willful heart. So anything that is against him is against his ways, right? And too obstinate to consult the commandments of Elohim. Each one doing what was right in his own eyes. Oh, we all know that, right? We all know that this world is doing pretty much what is good in their own eyes. They even ate blood, and the men were exterminated in the wilderness. Elohim commanded them at Kadesh, "Go up and possess the land." But they chose to follow the will of their spirit, and they did not listen to their Maker's voice or the commandments of their teacher. Instead, they grumbled in their tents. We all remember that, right? So Elohim became angry with their company. Their sons perished because of it. Their kings were exterminated because of it. Their heroes perished because of it. Their land was devastated because of it. And because of it, the members of the forefathers' covenant committed sin. And so were handed over to the sword because they abandoned the covenant of Elohim and chose their own will and followed their own willful heart, each man doing his own will. You see a pattern here? Everyone's doing their own will, right? So I have a Deuteronomy verse up here, Deuteronomy 29, 24 through 26. All the nations will say, "Why has Yahweh done this to this land? What caused the heart of this great anger?" Then people will say, "It is because they abandoned the covenant of Yahweh, the Elohim of their fathers, which he made them when he brought them out of the land of Egypt, and went and served other gods and worshiped them, gods whom they had not known and whom he had not allotted to them." Okay, but when those of them who were left held firm to the commandments. So here's another group. These guys are holding firm to the commandments of Elohim. He instituted his covenant with Israel forever, revealing to them things hidden. Again, this is hidden things. The word hidden things is all throughout the Dead Sea Scrolls as well. So let's take a look. He's revealing to them hidden things in which all Israel had gone wrong. Ooh, so there's some hidden things in which all Israel had gone wrong. Where did they go wrong? It says it right here. His holy Sabbaths, his glorious festivals, his righteous laws, his reliable ways, the desires of his will, which man should carry out, and so have life in them. He opened up to them, so they dug a well, yielding much water. Those who reject this water he will not allow to live. Folks, we want to see these hidden things. And in book of Matthew, chapter 11, 25 through 26, it states, "At the time Yeshua declared, 'I thank you, Father, Elohim of heaven and earth, that you have hidden these things from the wise and the understanding and revealed them to little children. Yes, Father, for such was your glorious will.'" So our Messiah, Yahusha, is even telling everyone that there are hidden things, right? There are these hidden things that are being hidden from the wise and understanding and being revealed to little children. Oh my goodness, I want to be that child. We need to come to him with a little bit of understanding, but just a lot of passion and yearning to be close to him and to follow his ways. That's like a little child. And so he hid those things so that he wasn't throwing pearls before swine. All right. And down here it said that those who reject this water, he will not allow to live. So John chapter 7, 36 through 38 says, "On the last day of the great day, Yeshua stood up and cried out, 'If anyone thirsts, let him come to me and drink. Whoever believes in me, as the scripture has said, out of his heart will flow rivers of living water.'" So here it is, the Damascus Document is stating those who reject this living water, he will not allow to live. All right, we have the next section here, and it says, "And although they had wallowed in the sin of humanity and in impure ways, and said, 'Surely this is our business,' Elohim in his mysterious ways atoned for their iniquity and forgave their transgression. So he built for them a faithful house in Israel, like none that had ever appeared before. And even at this day, those who hold firm to it shall receive the everlasting life." So again, if you're holding to his ways, you can receive everlasting life. And all human honor is rightly theirs. And Elohim promised them by Ezekiel the prophet, saying, "The priests and Levites and the sons of Zadok, who have kept the courses of my sanctuary, when the children of Israel strayed from me, they shall bring me fat and blood." Ezekiel 44:15. So this is speaking about the promises of the sanctuary being kept by priests, the Levites and the sons of Zadok, who kept the courses. So the priests that kept these courses were the very priests that kept these scrolls, and they protected these scrolls, and they wrote scrolls to future generations. And I think we should listen to these guys because they've got it together. All right. So it says the interpretive comment appears to be a later addition. So it seems as though this next part of the fragment was added by somebody else or at a later time. We're not so sure, but that's what the translators saw when they looked at this next part. The priests, they are the repentant of Israel who go out of the land of Judah, and the Levites are those accompanying them. And the sons of Zadok, they are the chosen of Israel, the ones called by name, who are to appear in the last days. So it's very interesting, and I have it highlighted in green because this is a prophecy. And I wrote over here, could this be us? Could this be talking about this generation? No knowledge of the sons of Zadok are anywhere. I really haven't heard that term. Maybe you know, maybe you don't. I haven't heard about a group of Zadok, Zadok priests down the road. Could it be that this is actually talking about a particular group of people or kind of people who are coming back to his ways, a kind of people who are seeking the courses that is spoken about just above in the last column. How about those who are seeking the true commandments and the true calendar, perhaps? It's very interesting. It's talking about that they will appear in the last days. And it makes it sound as if they weren't, and then they were. So I find it very interesting because of the current, I don't know, the last 10, 15 years, the current groups of people who are coming back to his ways. It seemed like it was gone for a while, but it's coming back. All right, so it says, this is the precise account of their names by their generations and the time they appeared, the number of their troubles and the years of their sojourn, and the precise account of their deeds. All right. So then we have the next section here, and we have the section that now begins, explains that the present age, so the age that this is being written, is under the power of Belial, that is Satan. Part of the beginning has been lost. So part of the beginning of this document they don't have. So let me go ahead and read what they do have here. It says, the holiness whom Elohim atoned for, and they acquitted the innocent and condemned the guilty, as well as all who came after them, who act according to the interpretation of the law by which the forefathers were taught, until the age is over, that is, the present time, like the covenant Elohim made with the forefathers to atone for their sin. And shall Elohim atone for them? When the total years of the present age are complete, there will be no further need to be connected to the house of Judah, but instead, each will stand on his own tower. The wall is built, the boundary removed. Now remember, we had boundary shifters, and we had those who were moving the boundaries around, but it says the boundaries are going to be removed. And this is mentioned in Micah chapter 7, verse 11, and I'll go ahead and read that. It says, a day for the building of your walls. In that day, the boundary shall be far exceeded, or the boundary shall be removed. So anytime scripture says in that day, we know it's speaking of the day of his return. So when he comes, he's going to remove the boundaries that have been shifted around, and the laws that have been hidden from us, the information that's been hidden from us. He's going to remove it all. All right. So what we need to know is that this promise will be extended out even for those outside of Judah. So he's stretching out his hand. He's saying, here, come, the boundary's been removed. You're invited. But the present age, Belial is unrestrained in Israel. Ooh, we know that Belial is unrestrained everywhere now, don't we? All right. So it says, Belial is unrestrained in Israel, just as Elohim said by Isaiah the prophet, the son of Amos, saying, for fear and pit and snare are upon thee, dweller in the land. So that's Isaiah 24, verse 17. And I will go ahead and read that. And it says, terror and pit, the snare are upon you, O inhabitants of the earth. So anyway, any translation that you have, dweller on the land, inhabitants of the earth, fear and pit snare us. Not good. We know that Belial has reign right now. All right. Moving along here, we have the 3 traps of Belial. So we're going to learn a little bit more about his trappings. This section, explaining the text just quoted, discloses some important ethical principles of the Qumran group that, in its members' eyes, differentiated them from other groups. Their opposition to polygamy, to the amassing of wealth, to defiling the temple in Jerusalem, and to marriage between uncles and nieces. So here we're going to learn a little bit of the laws, right? All right. The true meaning of this verse concerns the 3 traps of Belial, about which Levi, son of Jacob, said that Belial would catch Israel in. So he directed them toward 3 kinds of righteousness. The first is fornication. The second is wealth. And the third is defiling the sanctuary. Who escapes from one is caught in the next, and whoever escapes from that one is caught in the other. Now we have these shoddy wall builders. So we have the boundary shifters. I didn't highlight it here, but it should be in blue. Now we have the shoddy wall builders who went after the precept. Precept is a raver, of whom it says, they shall surely rave. That's Micah 2:6. They are caught in 2. Fornication, by taking 2 wives in their lifetimes. Although the principle of creation is male and female, he created them, Genesis 1:27. So they're pointing out right here that by taking a second wife in our lifetime is not acceptable. And we're going to read a little bit here next in this column 5. And those who went into the ark went 2 by 2. So obviously male and female, Genesis 7:9. Concerning the leader, it is written, he shall not multiply wives to himself. So this is Deuteronomy 17:17. So it says a leader, according to the Torah, should only have one wife. One wife. A king should have one wife. A priest should have one wife. Let's read this. But David had not read the sealed book of the law in the ark, for it was not opened in Israel from the day of the death of Eleazar and Joshua and the elders who served the goddess Ashereth. It lay buried and was not revealed until the appearance of Zadok. Nevertheless, the deeds of David were all excellent, except the murder of Uriah, and Elohim forgave him for that. So this is also mentioned in 1 Timothy 3:2. It says, therefore an overseer, so we're going to see that term throughout the scrolls as well. The overseer, or the head high priest, must be above reproach, the husband of one wife, sober-minded, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, and able to teach. Again, it's one wife, right? And so it says here that David, he was allotted a second wife because he actually didn't have the scroll that told him he should only have one wife. And so the Father, I believe, he judges us based on what we know and what we don't know. If we don't know, not because of ignorance, if we don't know something because we haven't really looked into it, maybe we should look into something, right? But David didn't have that information. All right. They also defile the sanctuary, for they do not separate clean from unclean according to the law. And they lie with women during her menstrual period. So we know that there's these groups of people who don't understand the law. They're not going to abide by the law. They're disrespecting the law. And one of those things is laying with a woman during her menstrual period. And I believe that that is applicable today. Furthermore, they marry each man the daughter of his brother and the daughter of his sister. Although Moses said, unto the sister of your mother you shall not draw near. She is the flesh of your mother. Leviticus 18:13 says, but the law of continuity is written for males and females alike. So if the brother's daughter uncovers the nakedness of the brother of her father, she is the flesh of her father. So again, there's unnatural relationships that we should not be having. And today that we don't see that really often, but in other countries, that's still happening. All right. Also, they have corrupted their Holy Spirit with blasphemous language, and they have reviled the statutes of Elohim's covenant, saying they're not well-founded. Oh my goodness, how many of us have heard that, right? They continually speak abhorrent things against them. So again, we know people today will come against us for following the commandments, right? Because they don't think that it matters today. All of them are kindlers and lighters of brands, Isaiah 50:11. The webs of a spider are their webs, and their eggs of vipers are their eggs, Isaiah 59:5. Whoever touches them shall not be clean. The more he does so, the more he is guilty, unless he is forced. And I think that's an interesting thing that they added here at the end. So if he's forced to do it, he might have a chance at restitution, being forgiven, right? All right. After the interpretive section here, the train of thought continues, just as the present age is an age of wickedness. Elohim's ways is the path in the past reveals how he punishes sin and provides for the faithful of Israel. All right, so we're going to take a look here. For in times past, Elohim punished their deeds, and his wrath burned against their misdeeds, for they are a people without insight. This is Isaiah 27:11. They are people wandering in counsel, for there is no insight in them. Deuteronomy 32:28. For in times past, Moses and Aaron stood in the power of the Prince of Lights and Belial. Okay, Prince of Lights and Belial. So there's two separate entities being spoken of here. Moses and Aaron stood in the power of Prince of Lights, and Belial raised up Janus and his brother in his cunning when seeking to do evil to Israel the first time. So Janus and Jambres is mentioned in 2 Timothy 3:8, and that states, just as Janus and Jambres opposed Moses, so these men also opposed the truth, men corrupted in mind and disqualified regarding the faith. So we have Moses and Aaron up against two men who are disqualified. Okay, so we've been talking about people who are without insight, wandering in counsel, people who, just don't have this information. They don't have the heart. They don't have the desire to follow Elohim. All right. In the time of destruction of the land of the boundary shifters, here we go again with these boundary shifters, they appeared and led Israel astray. And the land was devastated, for they had spoken rebellion against the commandments of Elohim through Moses, and also through the anointed of the Spirit. And they prophesied falsehood to turn Israel from following Elohim. But Elohim called to mind the covenant of the forefathers, and he raised up from Aaron insightful men, and from Israel wise men. So here we have the opposite of all of those other men. These are wise, insightful. And he taught them and they dug the well. The well the princes dug, the nobility of the people dug it with a rod. This is Numbers 21:18. There's a whole bunch in this one sentence here. He taught them and they dug a well. I don't believe it's talking about a physical digging of a well. This is digging of a well. What comes in a well? It's water, living water. They're digging for it. And they dig with the rod. Who's the rod? Those who dig for truth are well diggers, the repentant of Israel. And they dig with the rod. So it says here, he taught them, and they dug the well. The well the princes dug, the nobility of the people dug with the rod. Oh my goodness. It's crazy. I had to repeat it. I want to be a well digger. I hope you do too. And that's seeking these truths in the scriptures, and that's seeking the truth in the scrolls. I'm a well digger. All right, the symbolic interpretation of the verse last quoted. So here we have a continuation. So this is the authors of the scroll telling you what they just said. So they're giving you this interpretation here. The well is the law, and its diggers are the repentant of Israel who went out of the land of Judah and dwelt in the land of Damascus, because Elohim had called them all princes, for they sought him, and their honor was not denied by a single mouth. And the rod is the interpreter of the law, whom Isaiah said, he brings out a tool for his work. Isaiah 54:16. The nobility of the people are those who come to dig the well. Nobility, folks, nobility. Those are the people who have prestige, and they're the ones who are seeking this, right? They're seeking, they're wanting. So they're coming to dig this well by following the rules that the rod made. Who's the rod, everyone? Who is the rod that Isaiah prophesied about? It's our Messiah, right? The rod of Jesse. So they dig the well by following the rules that the rod made to live by during the whole era of wickedness. And without these rules, they shall obtain nothing until the appearance of the one who teaches righteousness in the last days. Who's the teacher of righteousness? Who's the rod, right? This is our Messiah. All right, and he is going to come in the last days. All right. The continuation of the exhortation. These paragraphs that we're going to read like a conclusion, and they may have occurred at the end of an earlier form of text. The author summarizes the way of life expected of those who enter the sect. So here we're talking about the Qumran group, the Zadokites. So we're going to look into a little bit about what they expect. None who have been brought into the covenant shall ever enter the sanctuary to light up his altar in vain. They shall lock the door, for Elohim said, would that one of you would lock my door so that you should not light up my altar in vain? That's in Malachi 1:10. They must be careful to act according to the specifications of the law, for the era of wickedness, separating from corrupt people, avoiding filthy, wicked lucre, taken from what is vowed or consecrated to Gad, or found in the temple funds. They must not rob the poor of Elohim's people, making widows wealth their booty, and killing orphans. Isaiah 10:2. They must distinguish between defiled and pure. So these people, if you're coming into this group, this Yahad that they talk about throughout the Dead Sea Scrolls, if you're coming in, you have to be a person of good character, right? So they must be able to distinguish between defiled and pure, teaching the difference between holy and profane. They must keep the Sabbath day according to the specification of the holy days, and the fast day according to the commandment. That fast day would be, right, Day of Atonement. And of the members of the new covenant in the land of Damascus, offering the holy things according to their specifications. So you should be able to learn the law, keep the law, and abide by it, and have a good, respectable reputation. All right. So here is Ezekiel 44:23. It says, "They shall teach my people the difference between holy and the common, and show them how to distinguish between the unclean and the clean." So if you are new to the Torah and you don't understand this, this goes a little bit deeper than just the clean and unclean foods. It's talking a lot more about anything and everything that has to do with the Torah, what's unclean and clean. So we should be able to learn this out and seek this out. Each one must love his brother as himself and support the poor, needy, and alien. They must seek each the welfare of his fellow, never betraying a family member according to the ordinance. Each must reprove his fellow according to the command, but must not bear a grudge day after day. They must separate from all kinds of ritual impurity according to their ordinance, not befouling each his Holy Spirit, just as Elohim has told them so to do. In short, for all who conduct their lives by these laws, and I'm going to get to that section in a moment. I wanted to stop real quick. Leviticus 19:18 states, "You shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against the sons of your own people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am Yahweh." All right, so back to this part. In short, for all who conduct their lives by these laws, perfect holiness according to all the instructions, Elohim's covenant stands firm to give them life for thousands of generations. So if you're going to hold firm to these commandments and these laws and have this upright behavior, Elohim gives us a prize, right? He gives us the life for 1,000 generations. Here we have the Geniza B document is adding. It says that, so again, it's a different fragment, so it just kind of adds on to this text. And it says, "As it is written, he keeps the covenant and loyalty to those who love him and keep his commandments for 1,000 generations." So that's Deuteronomy 7:9. So let me read the whole verse. "Know therefore that Yahweh your Elohim is Elohim, the faithful Elohim who keeps covenant and steadfast love with those who love him and keep his commandments to 1,000 generations." All right. So there's a rich reward for those who want to follow. An addendum on marriage is the next section. This paragraph might have been misplaced in antiquity. It belongs with the laws. So again, remember the Damascus Document has really two precepts. It's the exhortation and the laws, but they're putting it over here. Some have taken these words, apparently providing for the special needs and married members, to imply the presence also of unmarried or celibate members of the sect. So here's some information here. We have all of these misrepresentations of the people called Essenes. And the Essenes and those who kept these texts in Qumran were completely different people groups. The Essenes that were mentioned by Josephus and Pliny were celibate monks. They lived 25 miles south of Qumran, and they lived in seclusion in single cell homes that they had, and they're being confused all over the place with the Zadak priests and those who kept the Qumran documents and those who lived in Qumran. The Zadak priests allowed marriage, and you could be celibate if you wanted to, but they didn't do away with marriage in their group. And we're going to see a lot of those examples in here. And if you haven't watched my previous videos in terms of the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Zadokites versus Essenes, I would highly recommend that. All right, it says, "But if they live in camps according to the rule of the land," and they're going to, it says it adds, the Geniza adds, "which existed in ancient times, and marry women," and part B adds, "as is the custom of the law, and beget children, then let them live in accordance with the law. and by the ordinance of vows according to the rule of the law, just as it says, between a man, wife, between a man, wife, and between a father and his sons. Numbers 30:17. So this group allowed marriages in their camp. This is not the Essenes that everybody talks about. It's a completely different people group. All right. So I forgot to mention the 1,000 generations. I had a couple more verses over here. My apologies. First Chronicles 16:15 talked about, remember his covenant forever, the word that he commands for 1,000 generations. In Psalms 105:8 says, he remembers his covenant forever, the word that he commanded for 1,000 generations. So we have all of these promises for 1,000 generations for those who keep his laws. And what's interesting is it says here that if you get married, it's the custom of the law, and to beget children is just fine. So I know that I kind of go overboard in making sure that you all know that there is a difference between these two groups, the Essenes and the Zadokites, but I just want to let you know. All right, so moving along, the fulfillment of prophecy indicating the inevitability of punishment on those who reject Elohim's laws. Geneza B has a different version of this passage. Note the interpretive section embedded in this paragraph. So we're going to read that in just a second. All right. So it says, but all those who reject the commandments, so here we're kind of going back to those who are rejecting commandments and the rules, shall perish. When Elohim judged the land, bringing the just deserts of the wicked to them. That is, when the oracle of the prophet Isaiah, son of Amos, came true, which says, days are coming upon you and upon your people and upon your father's house that have never come before since the departure of Ephraim from Judah. Isaiah 7:17. That is, when the two houses of Israel separated, Ephraim departed from Judah. All who backslid were handed over to the sword, but all who held fast escaped to the land of the north. As it says, I will exile the tents of your king and the foundations of your images beyond the tents of Damascus. Amos 5:27. The books of the law are the tents of the king. And it says, I will re-erect the fallen tent of David. Again, prophecy here. Amos 9:11. The king is the congregation, and the foundation of your images is the books of the prophets whose words Israel despised. Interesting, right? So interesting that Israel despises the books of the prophets. We know a lot of people who live in the land of Israel today, still to this day, despise them because they don't listen to what the prophets had said. So now we're going to see this is all in green because this is all prophecy about the future. Let's take a look. It says the star is the interpreter of the law who comes to Damascus, as it is written. A star has left Jacob. A staff has risen from Israel. Numbers 24:17. We all know that talks about our Messiah, right? The latter is the leader of the whole nation. And when he appears, he will shatter all the sons of Seth. Numbers 24:17. They escaped in the first period of Elohim's judgment, but those who held back were handed over to the sword. So this is prophecy. He's coming back, folks. He's coming back. And those who kept these scrolls knew he was coming back, and they believed in the Messiah, and they held true to the words of the prophets. So we know that the star is the interpreter of the law, who is also the staff or the rod. So we know this is speaking directly of our Messiah. And yes, they believed the Messiah was coming. All right, the fulfillment of prophecy. This is an alternate version, it says, of the Geneza document. All right, so let's see here. It says, column 19, when the oracle of the prophet Zechariah comes true, O sword, be lively and smite my shepherd and the man loyal to me. So says Elohim. If you strike down the shepherd, the flock will scatter. Then I will turn my power against the little ones. This is Zechariah 13:7. Who is this talking about? We know that our shepherd died. Obviously, he rose again. But when he left, the sheep scattered. Right? And who is coming after those sheep? That's our adversary, right? Zechariah 13:7 says, "Awake, O sword, against my shepherd, against the man who stands next to me, declares Yahuwah of hosts. Strike the shepherd, and the sheep will be scattered. I will turn my hand against the little ones." So Satan's goal is to come against those who are set apart. All right. Then we go on to looking at some more here, and this is more prophecy. Because I have this in green, we have, "But those who gave heed to Elohim," okay, who gave heed to Elohim, the poor of the flock, Zechariah 11:7, "they will escape in the time of punishment, but all the rest will be handed over to the sword when Messiah of Aaron and of Israel comes." Okay, so they're telling you what's going to happen. This is prophecy of the last days, that the poor of the flock, they'll be able to escape in this punishment, right? And then it says that that the others will be handed over to the sword. All right, and then it says, "Just as it happened during the time of the first punishment, as Ezekiel said, make a mark on the foreheads of those who moan and lament." Ezekiel 9:4. "But the rest were given to the sword that makes retaliation for covenant violations." All right, so that's a lot. So this is Ezekiel 9:4, and it says, "Yahuwah said to him, pass through the city, through Jerusalem, and put a mark on the foreheads of those men who sigh and groan over all the abominations that are committed in it." So we know about the mark, right? The mark is for those who sigh, right? Those people who are saddened by all of those who cause iniquity, sin, right? Okay, so this is talking about make a mark on the foreheads of those who moan and lament. And then hopefully, we can escape because we have the mark, right? All right. And I hope I'm not giving a lot of my own interpretation. I'm letting this speak for itself and giving you the scriptures that actually are being quoted directly by these Zadokite priests. And then I'm just giving you a few extra verses along the way. So hopefully helping you to make some of these connections. Okay, so the lesson to be drawn from the fulfillment of prophecy is be faithful. All right, let's read column 8. And it says, "And such is the verdict on all members of the covenant who do not hold firm these laws. They are condemned by destruction by Belial, or to destruction by Belial. That is the day on which Yahuwah shall judge." Again, I have this in green because this is prophesying the end times, right? The last days, judgment day. All right. So we know that the destruction by Belial, right? We know about condemnation that's going to happen, right? "The princes of Judah were those like boundary shifters on whom I shall pour out wrath." And the Geniza B adds like water. So "on whom I shall pour out wrath like water," which is from Hosea 5:10. All right, so then we have, "Truly they were too sick to be healed. Every kind of galing wound adhered to them. Truly they had entered the covenant repenting because they did not turn away from traitorous practices. They relished in the customs of fornication and wicked lucre. Each of them vengefully bore a grudge against his brother each hating his fellow. Each of them were indifferent to their closest relatives, but drew near to indecency. They vaunted themselves in riches and in ill-gotten gains. Each of them did just what he pleased. Again, we have the willful heart, right? Each chose to follow his own willful heart. They did not separate from the people and their sin, but arrogantly threw off all restraint, adopting the customs of the wicked, of whom Elohim had said, their wine is venom of snakes, the cruel poison of vipers. All right, so we know, number one, that we've heard about the father against son. Luke 12:53 says, they will be divided, father against son, son against father, mother against daughter, and daughter against mother, mother-in-law against her daughter-in-law, and daughter-in-law against mother-in-law. And we also heard this before, the venom of snakes, right? The cruel poison of the vipers. We know Matthew 12, Yahusha called them brood of vipers, didn't he? Yes, sir. All right. So then we are moving along here to this next section. I think we only have time for a little bit more in this part. A pause for interpretation of the verse quoted, the chief of the kings of Greece. This is the translator's interpretation and who they think it's in reference to, and whether it is or not, it's up for you to decide. I don't think it has anything to do with these people, but let's just read on. The chief of the kings of Greece may refer to Antiochus Epiphanes, the Gentile ruler of Palestine at the time of the Maccabean rebellion. And the sect believed that their opponents did not understand that persecution of the time were caused by the nation's disobedience. All right, let's read on here. The snakes. The snakes are the kings of the Gentiles, and their wine is their customs, and their poison of vipers is the chief of the kings of Greece, who comes to wreak vengeance on them. So these authors of the scrolls of the Damascus document is trying to give us an example. Like these people who are coming in and these leaders who are coming in, they're bringing this evil with them, right? But I don't believe that it's speaking specifically of anyone. They're just trying to relate it to the time that they're living in. So the poison of vipers is the chief of kings of Greece who comes to wreak vengeance on them. But the shoddy wall builders and the whitewashers understood none of these things. For one who deals in mere wind, a spewer of lies, had spewed on them. So the Genesa B says a little bit differently, and it says, one who walks on wind and who deals in storms, one who preaches lies to men, one on whose entire company Elohim's, let's see here, sorry, I missed my place here, entire company Elohim's anger had burned hot. So we have these shoddy wall builders, these whitewashers. And I really think that they have something to do with the 70 watchers over the nations, not specifically just the kings of Greece. I think when it's speaking of this, the kings over the earth, I believe we know that there were 70 watchers that came and each one had a nation under them, right? We know that the Tower of Babel was built by shoddy wall builders. So it's speaking of the princes and kings over all the Gentiles, right? All right. All right. Despite the nation's perfidy, Elohim will remain faithful to his covenant. Let's see. But as Moses said to Israel, it is not for your righteousness or the integrity of your heart that you are going to dispossess the nations, but because he loved your ancestors and because he has kept his promise, Deuteronomy 9:5 and 7:8. Such is the verdict on the repentant of Israel, those who turn away from the usages of the common people, because Elohim loved the forefathers who bore witness to the people following him, following Elohim. So too, he loves those who follow them, for to such truly belonged the covenant of the fathers. But against his enemies, the shoddy wall builders, his anger burns. But he hates and despises those shoddy wall builders, and his anger burns hot, them and all who follow them. So again, I'm bringing us back to the shoddy wall builders, and we all remember that in scripture it talks about Psalms 118:22, Matthew 21:42, tells us that these are the builders who rejected the cornerstone, right? These are builders. Builders need the cornerstone. The shoddy wall builders don't want the cornerstone. So I believe that this is a reference to who those groups of people are. All right. A summary of the moral of the exhortations. The reference to Jeremiah is only in manuscript A, and it's obscure, it says. So there is one fate for everyone who rejects the commandments of Elohim and abandons them to follow their own willful heart. This is the word that Jeremiah spoke to Baruch, son of Neriah, and Elisha to Gazi, his servant. So it was a really short clip here, but this is actually mentioned in 1st Baruch. I have those listed there, 122 and 28. The next part is the B manuscript version of the amoral of the exhortations, the version of the Damascus document, of which B manuscript is a later copy, was more thoroughly revised to reflect the outlook of the sect. Thus, two distinct versions of the text is circulated in ancient times, and taken together, the Geniza copies preserve both versions. So there are two different versions, and they're going to show us the version, but again, two different ways to go about. I mean, you can rewrite a chapter from Genesis, right? But they're both going to be the same, pretty much saying the same thing, just might be summarized a little bit differently. So here we have B column 19, and it says, so it is with all the men who entered the new covenant in the land of Damascus. So they're talking about these groups of people who are coming to Damascus, who are coming to the Qumran community. These men who entered this new covenant in the land of Damascus, but then turned back and traitorously turned away from the fountain of living water, they shall not be reckoned among the council of the people. And their names shall not be written in their book from the day the beloved teacher dies until the Messiah from Aaron and from Israel appears. So again, we're talking about those who are coming to enter into this group, right? If you don't have that good, respectable personality, and you're not choosing to follow the ways, and you're actually walking away from those, you're not going to be written down in the book, right? And it says our beloved teacher. So this person is a different person than the teacher of righteousness. I believe that this person, the beloved teacher who died between him and the Messiah, I believe this is Moses. I wish that they really would have written out these names. Moses was, obviously they knew who he was. They didn't have the name of Yahusha at this time, but it would have been nice for them to say just Moses, not just beloved teacher. Anyway, such is the fate for all who join the company of the men of holy perfection and then become sick of obeying virtuous rules. So again, if you come into this group and then you just change your mind, then you're out. This is the type of person who melts the crucible, Ezekiel 22:21. When his actions become evident, he shall be sent away from the company as if his lot had never fallen among the disciples of Elohim. So if you come into the group, you need to be having the proper reputation, be going forward, not going backward, not doing anything against the commandments. So they had strict rules about coming into this group. All right. In keeping with his impiety, the most knowledgeable men shall punish him until he returns to take his place among the men of holy perfection. So there's discipline. When his actions become evident, according to the interpretation of the law, which the men of holy perfection live by, no one is allowed to share either wealth or work with such a one, for all the holy ones of the Almighty have cursed him. Such is the fate for all who reject the commandments, whether old or new, who have turned their thoughts to false Elohims or gods, and who have lived by their willful hearts. They have no part in the household of law. They will be condemned along with the men of mockery, because they have uttered lies against the correct laws and rejected the sure covenant that they made in the land of Damascus. That is the new covenant. Neither they nor their families shall have any part in the household of the law. So here we have the men of mockery. And this time we actually have a definition of who the men of mockery are. They are people who have uttered lies against the correct laws and rejected the sure covenant that they made in the land of Damascus. That is the new covenant. All right. Now, from the day the beloved teacher passed away, again, that's Moses, to the destruction of all the warriors who went back to the man of lie, will be about 40 years. We know 40 years after Moses' death, the Israelites went into captivity. We know 40 years from the time they left Egypt, they finally got to the promised land, right? A lot of the 40 years, there's a lot of patterns in the scrolls, and in all scriptures, there's a lot of patterns. But this is talking about going back to the man of the lie, 40 years. So when Moses passed and Joshua took over, 40 years passed by, and after Joshua died, they went into captivity in Cush, and this is in Judges 3:8. So I believe that's what that's talking about here. Now, at the time, Elohim's anger will burn against Israel, as he said, neither king nor prince, this is Hosea 3:4, nor judge, nor one who exhorts to do what is right will be left. But those who repent of the sin of Jacob have kept God's covenant. Then each will speak to his fellow, vindicating his brother, helping him walk in Elohim's way. And Elohim shall listen to what they say and hear it. And a record book has been written for him for those who fear Elohim and honor his name. Again, that's Malachi. We know there's a book of names, right? So the book honor of his name until salvation and righteousness are revealed for those who fear Elohim. And you shall again know the innocent from the guilty, those who serve Elohim and those who do not. Malachi 3:18. He keeps faith with thousands of those who love him, and to those who keep him for 1,000 generations. Exodus 26. Again, a lot of the 1,000 generation talk, right? As for those separatists who left the city of the sanctuary and relied on Elohim in the time of Israel's unfaithfulness, but defiled the temple, they shall return again to the way of the people in a few matters. Each of them shall be judged in the holy council according to his spirit. There is judgment. But all of the members, again, this is in green, so this is prophecy, all of the members of the covenant who breach the restriction of the law, when the glory of Elohim appears to Israel, they shall be excluded from the midst of the camp. And with them all who did evil in Judah when it was undergoing trial. Oh, there is definitely a separation, isn't there? All right, the end of the exhortations. But all who hold fast to these rules, going out and coming in according to the law, always obeying the teacher, and confessing to Elohim as follows: we have wickedly sinned, we and our ancestors, by living contrary to the covenant laws. Just and true are your judgments against us, and do not act arrogantly against his holy laws and his righteous ordinances and his reliable declarations, and who discipline themselves by the ancient laws. Right? Those who are, we understand they are ancient laws, but we want to be disciplined in them, by which the members of the Yahad were governed. I'm going to pause right there. Let's look at the word Yahad. The Hebrew word Yahad primarily conveys the idea of unity, coming together, and it is used to describe the act of joining or being united in purpose or action or spirit. This term can refer to physical gathering, emotional or spiritual unity, or the joining of forces for a common goal. All right, so we want to be part of this Yahad. All right, so it says, by which the members of the Yahad are governed, and listen attentively to the teacher of righteousness, not abandoning the correct laws. When they hear them, they will rejoice and be happy and exultant. I'm happy, aren't you? All right. They will prevail over all the inhabitants of the earth. Then Elohim will make atonement for them, and they will experience his deliverance because they have trusted in his holy name. All right. So next time I meet up, we're going to do the laws. So I'm going to pause there. So today we just went over the exhortations part of it. And so next time we're going to go through the laws. So I hope that you are learning something. You're excited. First of all, you should learn that let me come back here to my screen. Put myself back up on the screen. Here we go. I hope that you have learned something, and that something has maybe you have a bell ringing in your head and something was familiar about the writings, and maybe it just seems right. So far, this group doesn't seem crazy. This group seems to be following the ways, wanting us to return to the ways, and so we will continue to look into their laws, and I hope that you are reading this along with me, and please post some comments on this, and maybe you have more insight on it than I do. I don't have anybody that I've really learned from. These are my notes. I have a lot more notes because I keep a lot of notes, so I hope that we can come together and join back into the Yahad by keeping his commandments and his ways. So I hope that you will join me next time as we look into the laws of the Qumran community. Thank you for joining.